Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by the Current Consulting Group and sponsored by DrugPack. Today's presentation is titled, How to Offer an Occupational Health Program, Your Workers Make Healthy Profits. Today's webinar qualifies for one continuing education credit from SHRM, HRCI, and CCDAP for those who attend in its entirety. You will receive information following today's webinar on how to apply for that credit. Shortly, we'll be sharing with you a short video from today's sponsor, DrugPack. The audio for the video is available through your computer speakers only, so if you have dialed in for today's presentation, please be aware that you will not be able to hear the audio. And with that, we're excited to hear from today's webinar sponsor, so let's go ahead and turn it over to David Gonsalves, General Manager at DrugPack.
Hello, I'm David Gonsalves, General Manager of DrugPack. We're happy to sponsor this presentation focused on employers' use of occupational health services. We believe this presentation will be relevant and helpful to not only employers, but third-party administrators as well. As the year begins, many companies are evaluating what they have to offer and how to make their company better. And here at DrugPack, we have seen an increasing number of customers looking to expand their service offerings to include occupational health services. And adding support for physical exam results has been well worth it. In a moment, I'll turn the time over to Mark Perlstein and Rick Tennant with the Current Consulting Group. I want to thank you for attending this webinar and encourage you to check out drugpack.com to learn more about how DrugPack can help you as an employer or as a TPA. Now, I would like to share a 1-minute video highlighting a handful of DrugPack customers, and I'm sure these will be names you'll all recognize. Thank you for watching our video. Now, I'm pleased to be turning you over to Mark Perlstein and Rick Tennant. Mark, in particular, has extensive experience in occupational health screening. So I know you'll be in good hands with him and Rick in this presentation on how to offer an occupational health program. Healthy workers make healthy profits.
Thank you, David and Greta. It is great to be with everyone today on this bonus sleep day of 2024. My name is Rick Tennant, and I'm happy to introduce Mark and the agenda, as well as I will be assisting in reading the 3 poll questions, as well as questions and answers at the end of today's presentation. As you can see on the screen here, some of Mark's highlights. I wanted to introduce Mark by first saying I first met Mark in the early 2000s in Nashville, Tennessee, when he was new with Concentra. But his time in the industry started way before that. He has been in the drug and alcohol testing industry since 1985. That's right, the same year that Back to the Future was in theaters, Mark was starting out in the drug and alcohol testing industry. He began in the industry by implementing a drug and alcohol program for a major mechanical contractor in the Dallas area. He operated in the DER role, as well as his most well-known role as a liaison between TPAs and Concentra Medical. Today, we get to hear him speak on a subject that he believes in. Having seen these tests and services make a difference in the lives of individuals, as well as the companies that they work for. As mentioned, today's agenda, we're going to talk about 3 things mainly. We want to explore at a relatively high level some of the occupational health services that companies are buying and their benefits. This discussion was designed to speak to both employers as well as providers, teaching providers or TPAs how to talk to employers about these products and services, as well as how to assist in fulfilling them. Thirdly, or lastly, by offering these services, TPAs can get better economies of scale by bulk purchasing, allowing them to offer the products at a competitive price to their customers, saving their customers and employers time and or money by not having to manage the occupational health services in-house. And as we begin today's presentation, we will kick off with a poll of the audience. This will be the first of 3 polls placed throughout today's discussion. With that, the first poll is: what aspects of occupational health screening do you currently offer or include in your employee screening process? And please select all that apply. The results will be available momentarily after everybody chooses. Okay, we've got the results here, and it looks like, hey, you know what? Look at that, background checks and drug screens only. The edging out occupational health test just barely with 65%, and only 3% of us don't include any of these. So that's good news and good information. Thank you for participating in that. And with that, we're going to turn the time over to Mark Pearlstein. Mark, you have the controls. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Rick. I really appreciate it. And boy, do I wish I had one of those DeLoreans now. That would be a nice thing. So today I want, as Rick said, I'd like to talk about why have a safety and health program. I'm not going to try to make you into an expert by any means, but I want to hit the highlights and educate you enough so that if a client does talk to you and ask you about any of these services, at least you can start the conversation and sound a little bit like you know what you're talking about. So why have one of these programs? First of all, numbers tell us that 5,000 workers are killed on the job each year at a rate of about 14 per day, and 3.6 million suffer a serious job-related injury or illness. According to OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and if some of you don't know or have never heard of them, that's the group that watches over all the safety on job sites and in the workplace and comes up with the laws and regulations. They're the ones that can come in and if something happens, issue fines, but they do serve a wonderful purpose. They help businesses prevent workplace injuries and illnesses. They improve compliance with laws and regulations. They help reduce cost, including significant reductions in workers' compensation premiums, helps engage the workers, enhance the social responsibility goals, and increase productivity and enhance overall business operations. Back up to that third bullet point, I will start off telling you, in my experience, some years ago when I was at the mechanical contractor and I implemented a safety program, it not only included drug screens, but it did include pre-employment physicals and things like that. And I should also note this presentation today, I'm not going to be talking about drug testing. We'll leave that for another time. So it looks like everybody knows there's lots of discussion and research and information on drug screens. This is totally on what we're calling occupational safety and occupational health. But when I instituted a program like this at the employer where I worked, we were having a terrible problem with on-the-job accidents. The first year, I can tell you though, we started doing pre-placement exams and had a safety program. We were able to cut our accident rate in half, and we were on a retro program with our workers' comp carrier, and we got back $90,000 the very first year in workers' comp premiums. So it does pay off. It usually takes at least a year to see something like that happen, but it's definitely significant. So the core elements of a workplace safety and health program really have three legs. One is management leadership. Management must commit to implementing a program and using it to drive continuous improvement in safety and health. If you don't have the buy-in from the management of the employer, then these programs will probably never work, because they will just kind of do it half-heartedly. And at that point, it's not really going to pay off like it should. You have to have the worker participation. Obviously, the workers are the ones out there on the job site, in the offices, day to day, seeing what is safe and what isn't safe. And you want to be able to tap into the workers' collective experiences, knowledge, and their insight to find solutions to safety and health challenges, which leads us to the next area. Once those challenges are identified, there has to be a systematic process for controlling the workplace hazards. You must have some type of program in place where workers feel safe that they can report something and that management follows up with it. Some of the benefits of occupational medicine include being dedicated to the health and well-being of the employees. It really makes better hiring decisions for clients. As we talked about before, it can help reduce cost overall by avoiding claims. And you have occupational medicine physicians on board that can help give suggestions, watch over programs, and you go to them for reference. It also focuses on injury prevention and employee education, and it will keep everyone up to date on federal and state regulations for workplace health and safety, which include, as we mentioned before, anything from OSHA, from Department of Transportation, DOT regulations, and of course, individual state laws. Okay, how do we advise employers about these services?
And Mark, here we've got our second poll. So everybody, if you would participate in this, how important do you consider legal and regulatory considerations when offering occupational health services to your clients? And this time, only select one. As before, results will be available momentarily. All right, perfect. And it looks like the vast majority, extremely important. And we got 0 on no importance at all. So thank you for your participation in that. And Mark's going to address some of these in this next section.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, we're not going to talk about drug testing. I'm going to get into some of the most popular services that can be utilized today in occupational medicine. I'll start with DOT physicals, which I'm not going into pre-placement physical exams, but they kind of go hand in hand with DOT physicals. It's just that DOT physicals are the ones that we hear about, I think, most often. They're the ones that are mandated when you have drivers. They are a lot more, they have a lot more guidance built around them for what they're looking for when the physicians are giving the exams. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of all the different services. So the DOT physical is mandated by Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration for anybody who is driving a commercial motor vehicle. It helps determine if the driver is physically, mentally, and emotionally fit to operate a commercial vehicle. Employers should know that only a certified medical examiner can administer a DOT physical. That's an important title that physicians can acquire. They have to go through training, and it's not a 10-minute online course. It's about a 1-day course, if not longer, so that they can learn all of the regulations and all of the guidelines for a DOT physical. Like I said, DOT physicals are very, very strict when it comes to things like blood pressure and eyesight. So the doctors always need to know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And if, let's say, somebody falls right outside the guidelines for their blood pressure, what they can do and to end up being able to pass somebody, whether it means go to their primary care physician or whatever, and getting on medication and then coming back, but they have to know all those. DOT physicals are required when a driver operates a commercial motor vehicle across state lines, and employers of interstate drivers are subject to physical qualifications of those specific states that they operate in. I was talking about the certified medical examiners, and the way you know who is and who isn't, I would always obviously ask at any Occ Health centers that you're using, first of all, but there's a national registry online that you can Google, and it'll take you straight to that registry, and you can look up specific physicians to see if they are current with their certification. All right, next area is fit for duty evaluations, sometimes called return to work exams. These help determine if the employee can safely perform specific jobs and also return to work after serious illnesses or injury. So fit for duty exams really focus on specific areas of concern. They're not generic exams. So for example, let's say someone injures their shoulder one day at work and they're off work for a month. When that person is ready to come back to work, maybe it might be a good idea to send them in, have their employer send them in for a return to work exam. And that physician will only be examining the shoulder area to see if they can still perform the duties. So they're very, very specific, but it's just a good general idea to know that that person is healed enough to come back on the job site to work. Let's talk about audiograms, which is a very, very popular occupational test that has to be performed on lots of employees nationwide. Centers for Disease Control estimates 22 million workers are exposed to potentially damaging noise at the workplace each year. OSHA requires employers to implement a hearing conservation program when noise exposure is at or above 85 decibels, averaged over 8 working hours, or an 8-hour time-weighted average. Now, don't let that term, the hearing conservation program, scare you. Basically, what that comes down to is someone new who is working in an area that is loud, and a regular generic office will not get up to 85 decibels, but most people, most workplaces know if they have a hearing problem. So it means really that those applicants, those employees that first start should probably get a baseline audiogram, and then probably a year later come back for a follow-up, and every year after that to make sure that there's not any hearing loss. So it's not a, anything that somebody's going to have to spend $5,000 to have designed by an attorney or whatever. There are some regulations and some guidelines around it, but I just don't want anybody to be scared off when they hear hearing conservation program. So audiograms definitely identify a hearing standard for employees. So to the right, the picture that you see there is an actual OSHA approved audio booth. So what happens is the applicant or the employee goes inside the door, shuts the door, sits down at a chair inside. They look through that window to the outside. There should be a technician sitting on that stool with a little laptop. And while the applicant is wearing headphones, the technician will issue a series of tones that the person can hear and signal if they hear it in the left ear, the right ear, both ears, whatever. And the computer will rate that and put out a printout so that you can see what the hearing is each time. I'll also tell you those booths are not soundproof. So don't be alarmed if you get a client that comes back and says, hey, this guy's complaining that his employee heard some noises outside the booth. That's perfectly fine. They are designed so ambient noise can be heard from inside at the same time the test is going on. I used to get calls on a regular basis, especially when somebody failed the audiogram, that they said, oh, it wasn't soundproof. I was hearing people outside, so it must not have been accurate. Well, it is accurate, but the main point of that is always ask that an occupational health clinic that you're using has OSHA approved hearing booths. Next, we'll talk about pulmonary function test or spirometry, which is the same test, just a different name. So you'll hear it called both. But what are PFTs? PFTs are non-invasive tests that show how well the lungs are working. The test will measure lung capacity, volume, how quickly the flow of air is, and gas exchange. There are two types of disorders, obstructive and restrictive, that can cause problems with air moving in and out of the lungs. Again, once the test is being administered, a technician will have a laptop and a computer hooked up to test. Now I want to show you what that kind of looks like. On this slide, down at the bottom left, you'll see a person holding up a tube. That's what you blow into that tube, like I said, and if anybody has ever had these, you have to blow as hard and as long as you can until you're basically out of breath. And it measures, again, like I said, it measures the airflow. You'll see the print off to the side. And reasons why people could need a PFT, maybe they're working in a coal mine, graphite factories, a warehouse that has powdered chemicals, anywhere where they're breathing in a lot of dust or any type of environment that could make it hard to breathe. Other factors could include allergies and respiratory infections, or maybe an injury causing difficulty breathing. But again, it's a simple test, it's non-invasive, and depending on the job description, those are commonly ordered tests. Okay, let's talk about ergonomics in general, which also could be called human performance evaluations, or maybe just lift test in a simple form. And the purpose of those is the prevention of musculoskeletal disorders in the workplace. And to kind of bring that down, obviously, it's just to prevent, a lot of it is to prevent back injuries. But these include exposure to risk factors such as lifting heavy items, bending, reaching overhead, pushing, pulling, climbing, and sometimes twisting into awkward positions. So it really helps to reduce that risk by fitting the job to the person, and it identifies ways to reduce stress from overuse and injury. So the lift test, I used to get calls at Concentra all the time when CRAs and TPAs had clients that just said, you know, we need a lift test, so just give me your generic lift test. Give me your regular standard. Well, I'd have to tell them there is no standard lift test out there. Every single one of them is different because of the job description. So let's say you had somebody, an employer's got somebody working in a warehouse where they have to lift 50-pound bags of flour. Are they going to be lifting those one time a day from floor to waist? Are they going to push it overhead? Do they have to climb any ladders? All of those different factors and how many times they have to lift the objects weigh into what can be tested for in the lift test. I will tell you that lots of occupational health clinics have physical therapists on hand that can actually, they're the ones that will design these tests. And in some cases, you can hire, they will send out a physical therapist to a job site, and where the physical therapists observe the employees in action for a couple of hours, and then they'll come back and they'll say, okay, they need to be able to lift 50 pounds 3 times from floor to waist and waist to shoulder, and climb 10 stairs and maybe pull 45 pounds or whatever. Those cost a little bit of money, but it's not ridiculous amounts. For several $100s, that's when a physical therapist will come out, observe, and come back and build the human performance evaluation that's needed. And if you stop and think about it, if an employer has ever had any serious back injuries, those can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars on workers' comp claims. So spending $400 on a physical therapist to build a HPE or a lift test is a drop in the bucket. Other common tests that are done in an occupational setting are X-rays and EKGs. Not as much as some of the other tests, but I will tell you, depending on what services, what job function employees are doing, they may be required. So if somebody's working in a hazardous area and they have to have a hazmat exam, which is a special type of exam, X-rays and EKGs are required. So it could be something, and again, they are non-invasive, but the real point my point here is always make sure that any occupational health clinic that you're going to talk to or use has these services available for you. Okay. One of the last area I'm really going to talk about as far as services go are vaccines. So I would have people call and order these every single day, day in and day out, depending on their type of employees. And it might be as simple as flu shots. And especially when it comes to flu season, maybe an employer wants to have a nurse come on site and give free flu shots to their employees so hopefully nobody gets sick. Well, that's possible. They don't want employees to take the time off, but they want them to have flu shots. Your occupational health clinic should be able to help you with that. Travel vaccines are another big area. So if an employer has employees that travel overseas for any work purpose, they may need special travel vaccines depending on where they're going. So what you do is you give a call to the occupational health clinic and ask them, number one, if they have a travel nurse on staff that someone can talk to. And then once you identify what countries employees are going to, they will tell you, okay, they need, Japanese encephalitis and a typhoid shot or whatever. But it really helps to have someone who knows what's going on in those countries before it happens. You don't want to send somebody to a foreign country and them get sick. Same goes for Hep A and B. If you have clients that are either in the health industry, maybe they work at a hospital or they work at restaurants, they're probably going to need Hep A or B vaccines. Another big one that comes up quite often is the combination of tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. I will tell you, for some of us who are a little older, those vaccines used to be separate. Now they're all together. So if you add, they're called Tdap, TDAP, and when you go in or somebody needs a tetanus shot, which is the main one there probably, and you get that every 10 years, they're going to give you a combo, tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. Same thing applies with measles, mumps, and rubella. That's a combo vaccine nowadays too, just called an MMR. And then the others get a little bit more exotic, but still quite heavily ordered. The varicella for chickenpox, Japanese encephalitis, typhoid, going down the list to yellow fever. We don't hear much about it, but the good news is that's a good thing in the United States. We don't hear much about it. All right, so we talked about what OSHA does earlier, and let's talk a little bit about OSHA compliance. And on both sides, workers have rights and so do the employers. Workers have a right to a safe workplace. They can raise a safety or health concern with their employer or OSHA without being retaliated against. They can receive information and training with on-the-job hazards, including all hazardous substances. They can request a confidential OSHA inspection of their workplace if they believe there are unhealthy conditions there. They have a right to have a representative contact OSHA on their behalf. They can participate if they want, or have a representative participate in an inspection. They can file a complaint with OSHA if they've been retaliated against. And they can see any OSHA citations issued to their employer. They can also request copies of employer medical records, tests that measure hazards in the workplace, and the workplace injury and illness log. That doesn't give them the right to see employee medical records and anybody's individual records, but as a group, their employer, they can see those. On the flip side, employers need to provide employees a workplace free from recognized hazards and know that it's illegal to retaliate against an employee for using any of their rights under law, including raising a health and safety concern with you or OSHA, or reporting a work-related injury or illness. Employers must comply with all applicable OSHA standards and notify OSHA within 8 hours of a workplace fatality or within 24 hours for inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. Employers need to provide required training to all workers in a language and vocabulary they can understand. They need to prominently display the OSHA posters, if any of y'all have seen those, in their workplace, and put those posters at or near a place of the alleged violations if possible. And just so you know, on-site consultation services are available from OSHA. They offer that at no charge, where they'll come out with no threat of citation and walk through a job site to tell everyone what they see. Okay, let's talk about some fulfillment options and technology. So as far as getting these type of tests and services ordered, there are national occupational health centers around the country, such as Concentra, Nova, MedExpress. Those are the largest. There are also smaller local independent occupational health clinics. There are some urgent care facilities will handle some of these services. There could be a hospital associated facility. Lots of hospital groups now are getting into the business and opening up clinics in their cities. And when we talk about the fees for these services, there's really two ways that CRAs and TPAs can charge these. You can either charge them as a flat rate across the board for each service, or a cost plus. I'm going to talk about each of those just for a quick second. So what I mean by charging it as a flat rate is, let's say you have a client who operates in 3 states and they have DOT drivers in those 3 states. Well, maybe in one state you can find the physical exam for $100. In another state it's $125, but in another one it's $150. Depending on the volume, I've always suggested try to go an average of those costs so that you charge your clients one price for a service, no matter where it is. In the long run, it's a lot easier to deal with as opposed to cost plus, which is billing your client for the exact price plus a markup, a handling fee for that service. But what's going to happen is, if you go the cost plus route, you're going to be required to always have a copy of that invoice, attach it to your client's invoice, put your markup on it. And it's an accounting nightmare, I will tell you. A lot of medical clinics are notorious. I don't know why, but they can't seem to bill their clients in a timely basis. So it may be a month or 2 months or 3 months behind the time that the service is provided. And you're going to be chasing paperwork, and you don't want to wait 3 months to be able to bill your client for a service. You want to be able to bill them right away and get paid for it in a timely fashion. So this is just my personal opinion. I always say charge a flat rate for every service, get an average price, and that's what you go with. You should also know fees can be negotiated with the medical centers for each service. Now, I will tell you, if you just have, 3 drivers at a company, you're not going to be able to negotiate a lower fee. But if someone has 100 drivers and they're all in Miami or whatever, it's easy. I promise you, you can go to that clinic and say, okay, we've got 100 people that need these services. Can we talk about lowering, getting a discount? And they're willing to talk to you because they want those patients in the clinic, and they also want to be able to take care of injuries at some point if that comes up, which is another totally separate item. We're not going to have anything to do with that at all. I just wanted to bring it up, but that's their ulterior motive for giving you a discount. When it comes to technology, I have found that whatever applicant tracking platform you're probably using today will probably have some capabilities. It may need to be tweaked here and there, but it probably has some capabilities that you can use. Plus, many of the larger OCHealth centers have a website that you can retrieve test results, and they're going to try to push you that direction anyway. Documentation should be kept confidential and stored in separate files. You should know that you are acting as the program manager, and as such, you are entitled to see any and all medical records. As the program manager, HIPAA provisions allow you to maintain those documents. You are not making hiring decisions. The medical directors, the medical providers are doing that on your behalf. Think of them as your company doctor. Let's do another poll. Rick, you want to run this?
Yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you. Yeah, the last poll for today: Are you interested in expanding or learning more about occupational health services and to offer additional products? And on this one, please select just one. And we're calculating the responses. And now it looks like, hey, maybe we'd like to learn more. And so with this, for those that are very interested and would like to learn more, feel free. You could reach out to Mark independently after this this discussion and this meeting to learn more at your convenience. But as you do, please don't hesitate to ask. As Mark will finish up here, it's the services really are beneficial to companies, and there are a lot of companies doing them. So thank you for your participation in the polls today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark to wrap the presentation up here in the next few slides.
Good deal. Thanks, Rick. Okay. So how to really increase revenue by offering other services. Occ Health services can be expensive depending on the requirements, as we're going to see in a minute, but employers understand they are necessary and in some cases required, like DOT physicals. As you know, any additional services you provide a client will result in additional revenue for your entity. Typical markup on these services is anywhere from 10 to 20%. Employers need the services they need, and if you don't offer these services, they're going to go someplace else to acquire them. Find out what they need and become a one-stop solution for them. Being that one-stop shop demonstrates your commitment to your clients, and in turn, they trust you. You will be asked to provide many other services that you might have never heard of, and that's okay. You can do this. Like I said before, I used to get calls all the time with services that I'd never even heard of. A great example is one time somebody called me up and said, I need a sniff test. And I said, a sniff test? And I didn't know what that was. So I went to some of our doctors and asked them, and they said, oh yeah, that's a test that has been designed to help identify natural gas, which doesn't really have an odor, but they have a test that you can administer that will help employees out in the field. So that was new to me, but I used to get calls all the time for services I had never heard of. So that's okay. If you do, that's what we're here for. Either call DrugPack or call me or call Current, and we'll walk you through it. I want you to see some general pricing for these services, and by no means are these set in stone. I promise you, you will be able to find some of these services cheaper, but I also guarantee you're going to see some of these services a lot more expensive. But as you can see, I started off with just generic pre-placement exams at $110 to $130. DOT exams are more expensive especially because the certified medical examiners have gone through that training. Audiograms can be anywhere from $70 to $90. You'll see PFTs and X-rays and EKGs. When we get to ergonomics and human performance evaluations and vaccine, those rates are going to vary across the board, and especially because human performance evaluations, if you just have to find out if somebody can pick up 80-pound bag of something, that's going to be a pretty inexpensive test because they just have to go through it. They're not going to have them lift at 80 pounds right away. They have to build up to it, but it's going to be quick. Human performance evaluations are charged out by how long it takes the physical therapist to perform. Okay. So, in conclusion, hopefully this will help drive workplace health and safety with pre-employment, pre-placement screenings, help be proactive avoidance of workplace injuries and illnesses, and help with employee training and education.
All right, hey, thank you, Mark. Thanks for talking on this subject and for your expertise and experience with it. As we conclude this webinar today, we do have a few questions, and they're kind of piggyback or clarification questions on some of the information that you already shared. So the first one, and I'll ask these if you'll answer them, and then I'll ask the next one. So the first one was as far as the typical markup. As far as the typical markup, you talked about a cost plus model or a percentage model of 10 to 20%. But is there a preference, or is one more popular than another?
Yeah, it really is. Thanks for that question. So the averaged price for these services is probably the more popular that's used across the country by CRAs and TPAs, as I said, just for ease of accounting. The other side, cost plus, if you do that, you're going to want to put anywhere from, I would say, $5 per service to maybe $10 on top of it, or $15, depending on if it's an expensive, it's a $150 test. You might want to put $15 or $20 on it. But clearly, the averaged weighted price is the most popular.
Okay, so that's the more preferred method in most cases?
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. Thank you. And then with that, is there data that we can get a hold of to share with potential customers on the benefits of these types of programs?
Boy, it's out there, and I apologize. I don't know. I would Google it, obviously, just to start. I would also ask any occupational medical clinic that's in your neighborhood. If you're using one today, I would ask them. Lots of those. I know at Concentra, our docs would do white papers from time to time. So it's out there. I just don't know where to tell you to go get it, but I would start at the occupational clinic.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then let's see. And then the last one for today's the last question that came in was, what kind of TPAs or providers are offering occupational health services? Are they just big or small, or a combination of everything?
It's really a combination of everything. The largest background search companies in the country are doing this today. And I can tell you that probably the largest area of growth that I found over the years was from small entities who weren't offering anything, any type of occ health services, who wanted to start only because their clients would come to them and say, hey, I need DOT physicals, or I need a pre-placement physicals. I think it would benefit me. And they didn't know where to start. So I was really starting from scratch with a lot of groups. And I will tell that falls back into that comment I made before, that once your clients hear that you're offering these type of services, they're going to come out of the woodwork, because there's a good chance maybe they don't like the provider that they're using today. Maybe they don't like that great big company that they're using. Maybe they want to go to somebody smaller where they can get more personalized attention. So yeah, it's definitely a both.
Okay. Thank you. And hey, we got one more question that came in. Are there restrictions in certain states on occupational health services like there are for drug screening? I thought I heard something mentioned near the beginning of the webinar.
There's, well, I will say there are state guidelines for health and safety services and programs, not so much on individual services like testing. To my knowledge, you can audiograms and PFTs, the services that I talked about today, can be offered in all 50 states.
Okay, thank you. All right, that looks like it wraps up the questions that we've gotten. And so with that, Greta, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Wonderful. On behalf of the Current Consulting Group and Drug Pack, we hope you found today's presentation informative and helpful. I want to thank Rick Tennant of the Current Consulting Group for moderating this webinar, and Mark Perlstein of the Current Consulting Group for speaking on this topic and sharing his expertise. If you did submit a question we didn't get to today, we will answer you offline, and we will also send you information in a follow-up email on how to access the recorded version of today's presentation. And in addition, we will also send you continuing education information for those of you that qualify to receive 1 credit for attending today's presentation in its entirety. Thank you for your attendance today, and this concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.